great grandkids are going to ask you, you were there? That happened? And
Yeah.
yeah, you made an investment of 8 years with
Yeah.
Lehman, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It was a very formative moment in my life, not just my career, but my life to be living through that. For, it was exacerbated, in fact, by the fact that I was an expat living in London at the time this happened. So when, I had uprooted from New York, I moved over to London with my family. I had two young kids. My wife was pregnant at the time. And we were all there. And when you're an expat living abroad, at least at that time, all of your life is kind of organized through the firm that put you there. So it was our connection to the UK was Lehman Brothers. So there we are in this foreign country. We're loving it. We're having a great time. But then this is happening. You're watching it all unfold. And as as a managing director, you're relatively senior in the bank, but you actually don't have a lot of visibility into what's happening. You're sort of you're like a salesperson selling these products for the bank, but you don't have a visibility into what's happening in the C-suite. And so I'm watching all of this unfold like everybody else. I'm getting information from CNBC and from reading the paper, and obviously everybody's talking in the halls about what's happening. Everybody's convincing themselves that we're going to be fine. Oh, we're going to be fine. Oh, don't worry. That was Bear Stearns. That we're different from Bear. We'll be fine. And so you watch it, and every day it gets a little worse, and every day it gets a little worse, and every day until that final weekend. And I remember so well that final weekend when all the negotiations were taking place down at the New York Fed, and all the the heads of all the banks and Paulson and everybody was there trying to decide what to do. Do they bail the banks out? Do they, moral hazard was the term that I learned in that process. I hadn't heard moral hazard before, and that became something we all became familiar with. And I remember it was the Sunday night coming into Monday morning that the bankruptcy would file at midnight New York time. And I'm in London, so 5 hours ahead. I didn't sleep a wink. I lay there waiting for 5 a.m. to arrive when I would see, did we or did we not file for bankruptcy? At the time, it was a BlackBerry, not an iPhone. I look at my BlackBerry, Lehman files for bankruptcy, get in the car and drive down to Canary Wharf where we were getting ready to see what would happen. And I remember very vividly Christian Meisner, who was the head of European investment banking. He was as shell-shocked as the rest of us. Everybody was sort of looking around saying, what do we do? He said to everybody gathered that morning, all right, folks, you're all going to be fired. It's not a question of if, it's just when. There may be a handful of you who will be kept on to help wrap things up, but everybody else, go up to your office, pack things up. If you're a managing director and you have a mandate, you've got business that is live, call up the clients and resign, because obviously we're done. And then, pack up your things and we'll see, you'll get your final paycheck whenever they sort through that. And so everybody did what he said. In fact, the very first call that I made was to Chris Winfrey, who was at the time the CFO of Unity Media, which was a German cable company. And we were one of the book runners on their pending IPO. I called Chris and I said, hi, Chris, I'm really sorry, but I have to tell you that we need to resign. This has just happened. He said, don't worry. Thank you for calling, first of all. I hope you're all right. And don't worry, we won't be going public anytime soon with what's happening in the capital markets. That's the same Chris who I end up working for at Charter Communications. He moved back to the U.S. I ultimately moved back to the U.S. We stayed in touch. He became a client of mine when I was back in New York, and then ultimately he became my boss. But it was a surreal moment. It was something that stuck with me. And in fact, the lessons from that time came back in recent days with these regional banking collapses with Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic. And, I'm in a network with a bunch of other CFOs. And as you know, Silicon Valley Bank supports many, many startups. And a lot of my peers had a lot of their cash and all of their sort of lines of credit tied up in Silicon Valley Bank. And I was watching everybody go through the motions to try to figure out, is SVB going to survive and what am I going to do? It really brought me back to 2008 in a not so good way.
This podcast is made possible by Ledge.